Hello, hello, my lovely little jack-o'-lanterns, and welcome to another live stream. It has been a good week or so before I've done one because I have been working hard and hardy on my new series, or my latest series, Historical Horror Folktales, which just went up like 3 days ago on my channel. So, sweet. Let me show this. There we go. So, basically, yeah. 3 people have joined, 5 likes. Did you join? Oh, wow. This is good. Yeah, so this is the Sirens Call Act 2 audiobook chapters 11 and 12. Probably about an hour or so stream, decently long. So very, 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 very excited to be doing this stream. It's been a while since I've done one, so I'm excited to get back into it. I'm going to prep you right now, from now on, until we get through this entire audiobook. We will be doing just live streams on the channel. So it depends on when I have time, because I do have school coming up in 6 days. So I won't be able to do a stream like every day or every other day, because I would have to you know, work around my own schedule. Sorry, I'm just like stuttering. So yeah, today's chapters 11 and 12. So they're still in the Dutch colony, as we all know. So I'm pretty sure you know what has happened so far in the story. If you're forgotten, just go back and watch the other streams and catch yourself up until now. So yeah, they're just, by the way, we'll probably, after this, I'm pretty sure this is the last stream that we're going to do like more than one chapter, because from now on we're just doing one chapter each for each stream, because they're so damn long up to this point. So yeah, so we all know what has happened in the all the way up to this point in the story. So in the book we're on page 305, but and on chapter 12, but in the audiobook we are 7 hours and 24 minutes in. Jesus Christ, I can't believe we've made it 7.5 hours in. That is fucking crazy. I will probably be doing a stream tomorrow as well for chapter 13 and so on, to try to get through. I'm actually going to maybe try to get through this before I start school, but if I can't, I can't, and it's fine. So yeah, very, very exciting. So as of right now, Henry, Daniel, Tim, Finn, Jeb, and Ka, and William Stanley, who is still being tortured by Slow John, are in the Dutch colony, still working for Van de Vliet as white slaves. Yeah, so not a good old time, and it's still 1680. So we're still in part 6, which is we're slaves in a Dutch colony. So yeah, still in part 6. So the tensions are getting high, guys. It's getting intense. So I typically, before we start this, I just want to talk for a minute. You know, I typically do love doing live streams. I think, honestly, other than like making like documentaries and audiobooks and doing, you know, Minecraft content, is probably one of the things I enjoy most. It's just, I don't know, it's just nice to sit back and listen to an audiobook or music together. It's just really, to me, it's really relaxing, I guess. So I am enjoying, you know, going through this audiobook live, even though, yeah, I do have it uploaded on the channel and you could just go listen to it whenever you want. But there's just something about doing it live, I guess, and just sitting there and doing it like a pace at a time. I just think that's kind of cool. But I am really, really enjoying listening to it in total, and we are planning to get through all 19 hours. So we're almost halfway through the audiobook, which is pretty crazy. All right. Let's see. All right. So let's begin, guys. We're on chapter 11. So we're on October 1680, JabberWocky Estate. You guys ready? All right, let's get into it.
stood on top of the scaffolding on the cloudless day it was. A cool wind whipped through my long brown hair and my leather cap. The air was chilly and the sun was warm. I watched the closed armory door from across the yard. Daniel stayed by my side, his long shaggy black locks drenched in sweat and his face red from lifting stones. He had taken my share of the work, for both of my shoulders were numb and ached of work and protecting me from Hugo's lash. I loved Dan in that way, that he would protect me before himself, and that truly formed a bond between us. We had been forcefully brought back and forth across the yard into the room with Slow John, driving us insane at what's happening to the poor man. Slow John came through the gates and crossed the courtyard to the armory with his measured, undertaken tread. I stared him down in disdain. Suddenly, I noticed that he was heading for the scaffold and was walking under us from below. In anger and rage, I spun around to look for anything on the wood lined with tools, old nails, or hammers. I saw a big iron mallet and snatched it up, that laid at my boots on the planks. I lifted it up above my head to hurl it down and crush the executioner's skull. Just before I was about to let it fly onto him, Daniel seized my wrist. He eased the hammer from my grip as though he were taking a toy from a child and placed it atop the wall beyond my reach. "Why did you do that?" I snarled at Dan. "I could have killed the swine." "Henry, I understand what you want, but you would sacrifice your own life for it?" Daniel asked me with compassion. "You can't save Will by killing the preacher man. You will achieve nothing from it. They will just send another to kill him." I glared at Dan for stopping me, but loosened my emotions. "I know you're right. I'm always right." Daniel grinned. I smirked. Aye, but we need to kill that fuck. In due time, they will give us all theirs. Jeb growled behind us, hammering on an anvil. I turned from sweating Jeb in tattered clothes to gaze back across the grassy courtyard to see Mansir bring Will up from the dungeon. He could not walk unaided on his broken bandaged feet, but his head bobbed up and down as they dragged him across. "William!" I shouted. "I can't let this happen," Jeb growled. Will looked up at us, grinned through broken teeth, and called in a tiny voice. "Be strong, lads. I know you'll make it out of here and send these bitches to hell." And Mansir forced him down into the armory. The day was long, longer than any that I had ever been through, and the north side of the courtyard was in deep shadow when I at last, Slow John, re-emerged from below the armory. "This time I'll kill the poisonous swine," I shouted. But again, Dan held me back, and I tried to shake him off as the man walked under us and then through the castle gates. I shook Dan off, upset. He aimed his finger at me. "You must wait for the right moment." "I know," I trailed off. I heard the screech of the iron door open from across and saw Hop scampering out into the yard, his face ghastly. He summoned the company surgeon, and the two men went down the stairs and came back up with Will. "William!" Finn yelled, but there was no reply. I've warned you often enough," Hugo blasted at me. Hugo strode out onto the boards and laid half a dozen lashes at me across my back. Daniel, Tim, and the others tried to intervene, but they were held back by the soldiers on the planks. I made no attempt to avoid them, and Bernard stepped back astonished that it showed no pain. There was no point in showing agony to these monsters. We had to stay strong for our journey ahead, the mermaid, my crew, and for Brita. Bernard corrected his manner. "Any more of you imbeciles try anything, I'll send the dogs on you," he promised as he turned away. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, the company surgeon watched gravely as the soldiers carried Will away to the cell. Then, he accompanied by Hop, he set off to Van der Vlieta's suite on the south side of the courtyard. Van der Vlieta looked up in irritation from the papers that littered his desk as a fire blazed in the background in a hearth. "Yes, what is it, Dr. Czar? I am a busy man. I hope you have not come here to waste my time." "It is the prisoner, Your Excellency." The surgeon looked flustered and apologetic. Van did not allow him to continue, but he turned to Hop, who stood nervously behind the doctor, twisting his hat in his fingers. "Well, Hop, has the pirate succumbed yet? Has he told us what we want to know?" He shouted at Hop, and he retreated a pace. "He is stubborn. I would never have believed it possible. Any human being." He broke off in a long stammer. "I hold you responsible, Hop." Van der Vlieta came menacingly from behind his desk. He was warming to the sport of baiting the miserable clerk, but the surgeon intervened. "Your Excellency, I fear for the prisoner's life. Another day of questioning, she may not survive it. Van der Velida rounded him now. That, Doctor, is the main object of this whole business. All of Henry's men, including him, are condemned to death. He will die, and you have my solemn word on that. He went back to his desk and lowered himself into the soft chair. Don't come here to give me news of his decease. All I want to know from you is whether or not he is capable of feeling pain, and if he is capable of speaking or giving an understanding of a question. Well, is he, Doctor? Your Excellency. The doctor removed his eyeglasses and polished the lenses as he composed a reply. He knew what Van der Velida wanted to hear, and he knew that it was not politic to deny him. At the moment, the prisoner is not compos mantis. Van scowled and cut in. What of the executioner's vaunted skills? I thought he never lost a prisoner, not unintentionally anyway. Sir, I am not disparaging the skills of the state executioner. I am sure that by tomorrow the prisoner will have recovered consciousness. You mean tomorrow he will be healthy enough to continue questioning? Van asked. Yes, Your Excellency. That is my opinion. Well, sir, I will hold you to that. If the pirate dies before he can be formally killed in accordance with the judgment of the court, you will answer to me. The populace must see justice before. It is no good the man passing peacefully away in a closed room below the walls. We want him out of there. We want him out there on the parade for all to see. I want an example made out of him. Do you understand? Van grinned. Yes, Your Excellency. The doctor backed towards the door. You too, Hop. Do you understand, dolt? I want to know where he has hidden that mermaid, and then I want a good rousing of it. For your own good, you had better deliver both those things. Yes, Your Excellency. I want to speak with Slow John. Send him to me before he starts work tomorrow morning. I want to make certain that he fully understands his responsibilities, Van said. I will bring the executioner to you myself, Hop promised. Once more it was dark dawn when Hugo Bernard stopped us walking on the walls and ordered the lines of his prisoners down into the courtyard. Once it broke light, we had been walking on the castle walls for 2 hours. It was coming along slowly, for most of the prisoners were at the feet of exhaustion and hunger. As I hammered in a plank in the beating sun, I watched him carry William up from the dungeon with Hop and Dr. Czar on either side of the litter. They seemed both worried men, for there was no sign of life in the broken figure. Even when I had defied Bernard's whip, Will did not even look up at us. William! Damn! Jeb screamed, kicking his boots on the plank. Jeb, calm yourself. Finn said, but Jeb huffed and puffed madly with rage. I don't know if I can take much more of it, Jeb whimpered. They took him down to where Slow John awaited him, but within minutes, Hop, Czar, and Slow John reached the sunlight and stood talking for a short while. Then they walked to the governor's suite together. Jeb's mouth quivered. My God, I think poor young William Stanley may be dead. Tim assured him, we don't know that for sure. Let's just wait and see. Van der Velida was standing by the stained glass window, peering out at the shipping that lay anchored off the shore on the Dutch harbor. Late the previous evening, another company galley had sailed into port and was expecting the captain of the ship to call him for provisions and stores. Van turned, annoyed from the window, at the 3 men that filed into his chamber. Ja, Hop! He looked at his favorite victim. You have remembered my orders for once, hey? You have brought the state executioner to speak with me. He turned to Slow John. So, has the pirate told you where Henry and his gang have hidden the mermaid? Come on, fellows, speak up! Slow John's expression did not change as he said softly, I have worked carefully not to damage the respondent beyond usefulness, but I am nearing the end. Soon he will no longer hear my voice, nor be sensible to any further persuasion. You have failed? His voice trembled with anger. No, not yet. Slow John said, he is strong. I would never have believed how strong. But there is still the rack. No man could weather the rack. You have not used it yet, Van demanded. Why not? To me, it's the last resort. Once they have been racked, there is nothing left. It is the end. Slow John said. Will it work with this one? Van der Velida wanted to know. What happens if he still resists? Then there is only the scaffold and the gibbet, said Slow John. Slowly, Van turned to Dr. Czar. What is your opinion, Doctor? Your Excellency, if you require an execution, then it should be carried out very soon after the man is racked. How soon? Van der Vliet demanded. Today, before nightfall. After racking, he will not last the night. The doctor frowned. Van der Vliet turned back to Slow John. You have disappointed me. I am displeased. Slow John did not seem to hear the remark. His eyes did not even flinch as he stared back at Van. However, we must do what we can to make the best of this whole sorry business. I will order the execution for 3 o'clock this afternoon. In the meantime, you are to go back to the rack and place the pirate on it. I understand, Your Excellency, Slow John said sternly. You have failed me once. Do not do so again. He must be alive when he goes to the scaffold. Van der Vliet turned to the clerk. Hop, send the messengers through the town. I am declaring the rest of today to be a holiday throughout the colony, except for the work on the castle walls. William Stanley will be executed at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Every burgher in the colony must be there. I want all to see how we deal with a pirate. Oh, and by the way, make certain that Katina is informed. She will be very angry if she misses the sport. It was 2 o'clock when I saw them bring William Stanley on a litter from the cell below the armory. They had not bothered to cover his naked body. Even from high up on the south wall of the castle, and with my vision full of tears, I could see that Will's body had been grotesquely deformed by the rack. Every one of the great joints in his limbs and his shoulders and pelvis were dislocated, swollen and bruised purple black. The execution detail of soldiers was drawn up in the courtyard before the castle wall, as we still tired to work enough to draw Chico's whip. Led by an officer with a sword, they fell around the litter. 20 men marched in front, and 20 followed behind, their muskets up the slope. The tap, 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 tap of the death drum rang out to my ears. The sound shot out through the yard and onto the town. My God, Jeb sank to his knees. Will is dead, and he began to sob in his hands. William! He cried to the sky. I knew this young lad was important to Jeb here, and I quite got attached to the young man too in Jeb's crew. Me and Daniel ran over, dropping our hammers, and comforted him. Jeb, it's all right, son, I said. He cried into his hands as tears ran down his cheeks. Daniel slung his arm around Jeb as we watched in the icy wind. Jeb made no move to pull away from him. All the workers around us, and me and my mates, removed our leather caps in respect. I placed my leather cap across my chest as they passed beneath us. God bless you, Tim muttered. From what I got to know of these months, Will was a good man. A few men nodded in agreement, and Hugo's black hound whimpered mournfully. For once, we stopped work, and we walked across the yard with my friends behind, slipping back on my cap. We came to the castle gates, and I gazed out onto the street. Out on the street, a crowd awaited around the gibbet in tense silence. Every living soul in the colony was there. Above their heads, Slow John waited on the high platform. He wore his leather apron, and his head was covered with a mask across his face, the mask of death. His eyes and mouth were all that showed through the slits of the black cloth. No words needed to be said. We could all feel the emotion together. Led by the drummer in the precision march with a slow and measured pace towards him, Slow John waited with his arms across his chest. I watched as he turned his head to the governor's carriage, coming down from the gardens in it across the street. Slow John bowed to Van, and Katina as car guided the 6 horses to the foot of the scaffold and brought the vehicle to a halt. Slow John's yellow eyes met Katina through the mask of his headcloth. He bowed again, and this time to her directly. It seemed Katina had every man under her spell in this colony. He has no reason to act so grand. The oaf has made a botch of a job, Van grumbled from the carriage. He has killed the man without getting a word out of him. I don't know what your father and the other members of the 17 are going to say when they hear this. They're going to blame me, of course. Will didn't even give the location the man made up. He's a strong lad. Daniel grinned. He's always been that way, Jeb muttered. I respect him, Finn said. I heard Katina scoff in the carriage. As always, you will have to protect me to protect you, my darling, she said, and stood up in the carriage to have a better view. The escort stooped at the foot of the gallows, and the figure still was lifted and placed at Slow John's feet. A low growl went up from the watchers as Slow John knelt beside it and began a grisly task. Before us, he began cutting up Will's body. Tim threw up over the wall. I can't watch this. Jeb stared with a blank face, watching as if it wasn't real for him. I can't. A little later, when the crowd gave forth a lusty roar made up of excitement and awe and glee, the grey horses fidgeted nervously in the sound and smell of fresh human blood. I watched from the wall to see Carr calm the horses down. He must have become fond of those stallions. He then looked up at all of us sitting on the castle wall. Carr gave a nod to me and to Jeb and to all of us. Carr, the new coachman, Finn said. That he is, Jeb smiled. We held a silent nod to each other. He was just as tall and as strong as Daniel. I felt my own heart might burst in the barrel of my chest for Will. I turned back to the scaffold to see Will's body rise slowly in the air, and the crowd laughed. Jeb trembled with rage. Slow John's pressure on the rope was gentle and sure as he lifted Will from the litter by his neck. It required a delicate touch to not snap the vertebrae and end it all too soon. It was a matter of pride to him that the last spark of life must not be snuffed out of that broken husk until after the drawing of the viscera. The crowd laughed at the hanging. We should not mourn for him. No, we should not mourn, I said angrily. We should honor him by murdering everyone in this place and sending it to the depths of hell where it belongs. He'll have you hanging by a string. Or just if he prefers, you perish all your dreams become nightmarish if you block his path or plan to do. Yeah, Mr. Usher always gets his man. Yeah, Mr. Usher always gets his man. Yeah, Mr. Usher always gets his man. 4 days, William Stanley's dismembered body remained on public display. Every single morning, when I would walk on the scaffold, and when the sun rose in the sky over Denmark, I would look down from the walls and saw him still hanging there. It was the hardest for Jeb Gold. He was a lost man in the pit of rage, and me and Tim had to calm him down at times from killing Hugo. The gulls came from the beach in a shrieking cloud of black and white wings and squabbled ravenously over the feast. When they had gorged, they perched on the railing and rained the planks with whitewash liquid on the gibbet. For the first time, I hated my eyesight to be able to see such a horrifying sight. By the third day, the birds had picked the flesh from Will's skull until it grinned with eye sockets to the sky. The people walked well by it from the street, on their way to the castle as they passed the gibbet, and women held herbs to their noses to mask the smell of rotting meat. However, on the dawning of the 5th day, when I gazed over to the gibbet, it was empty. Will's pathetic remains no longer hung there, and the seagulls had gone back to the beach. Thank the merciful God, Tim prayed to me and Daniel. Now Will is at peace. Yet it is a passing strange that they have taken the corpse away so soon. Daniel was puzzled. I would not have thought that Van der Verliede could be so compassionate. Zucchina had shown him how to slip the grating on one of the small back windows of the slave quarters and squeeze his great body through. The night guard at the residence had become lax over the years, and Carr had little difficulty evading the watch. For 3 consecutive nights, he escaped from the slave quarters. Zucchina warned him that he must return at least 2 hours before dawn. For that hour, the watch would rouse themselves and put on a show of vigilance to impress the household. Once he had escaped over the walls, it took Carr less than an hour to run through the darkness to the boundary of the colony, marked by a hedge of bitter almond bushes planted at the order of Van. Although the hedge was still scraggly, and there was more gaps than barriers in its length, it was the line over which no man might pass without the governor's permission. On the other hand, none of the scattered tribes that inhabited the forest beyond were allowed to cross into the hedge of the colony. On the orders of the company, they were to be shot or hanged if they transported the boundary. The VOC was no longer prepared to tolerate some tribes to obey the law of civilization, and the Christian religion the Dutch had so generously offered to provide them in exchange for their land. Each night, Carr crossed the makeshift boundary and ranged like a silent black ghost across the flat plain whose wide express cut off into the Dutch forest. There were some wild animals that reside, such as bulls and deer. Carr needed a black bull. Twice he had been so close as to smell the buffalo in the bush. This scent reminded him of his father's herds of cattle, which he had tended in his childhood before circumcision. He had heard the grunting of great beasts and the lowing of calves. He had followed their deeply sloughed hoof marks and see splashes of their wet dung still steaming in the moonlight. But each time they had heard him coming, and they came crashing away into the bush. Carr could not pursue them further, for it was past midnight, and he was still hours away from the bitter almond hedge. On the third night, he took the chance of creeping out the window of the slave quarters an hour earlier than Zucchina had told him. One of the hounds rushed at him, but before it could alarm the watch, Carr calmed it with a soft whistle. The hound saw him and licked his hand. He stroked its head and whispered softly to it in the language of the forests, and left it whining and wagging its tail as he slipped over the wall like a dark moon. During his previous hunts, he had discovered that each night the buffalo herd left the fastness of the dense forest to drink at a pond or creek a mile or so beyond the hedge. He would be able to catch them while they drank. It was his best chance of being able to pick the bull and make his stalk. From a hollow tree at the edge of the forest, he retrieved the bow that he had cut and carved from a branch of wild olive. Zucchina had stolen a single iron arrowhead from the collection of weapons that Governor Van had assembled during his service in the Indies, which now he hung on the walls of the residence. It was unlikely that it would be missed from among the dozens of swords, shields, and knives on display over his fireplace.
"I will return it to you,"
he promised Zucchina.
I would not have you suffer if it should be missed."
"Your need of it is greater than my risk," she told him as he slipped the arrowhead wrapped in a scrap cloth beneath the seat of the carriage. "I also had a father who was denied a decent burial." Carr had fitted the arrowhead to a reed shaft and bound it in place with twine and pitch. He had fletched it with the mouth feathers from the hunting falcons housed in the mews behind the stables. However, he did not have time to search for the insect herbs from which to brew the poison from the barbs, and so he must rely on the single shaft flying true to the mark. Now, as Carr hunted in the shadows, he found an old forgotten skills returning to him and recalled instruction that he had undergone as a young boy from the elders of his tribe. He felt the night wind swiftly hit his bare chest and flanks and was aware of its direction at all times as he circled the pond. The wind was strong enough to shake all tall reeds and cover any sound he might make, as he could move swiftly over the last few paces. He stared ahead to see the great ploops plodding to the hold and slapping the water. "A bull," he breathed. "A bull of a bull." The bull had finished drinking. The crafty old beast had come ahead of the cows and calves of the herd. His back was coated with glistening wet mud from the water, and he plodded towards Carr where he was crouched, his hooves squishing the mud. Carr lost sight of the prey as he sank among the stems and let him come. But he could mark him by the sound of his heavy breathing and by the rasping of the reeds dragging down his flanks. The bull was very close, but still Carr was out of sight, when suddenly he shook his head as the reed stem tangled its horns and his ears flapped against his cheeks.
"If I reach out now, I could touch its snout,"
Carr thought. Every nerve in his body was drawn as tight as the bowstring in his fingers. The reed bank parted in front of Carr, and the massive head came through, the moonlight gleaming on the curved bosses of his horns. Abruptly, the bull became aware of something amiss and raised his huge black head. As he lifted his muzzle to test the air, his nose was wet and shining, and water drooled from his lips. Carr could feel its breath on him. Carr stretched the bowstring and aimed the arrow at the animal. As the bull turned his head, he revealed the notch behind his ear with the neck fused with the bone of his skull. Carr held his aim for a heartbeat longer, then loosened the arrow. It flashed and wired in the moonlight, leaping from his hand and burying it half into the black neck. The bull reeled back. If the arrowhead had found the gap between the spine, as Kaa had hoped, he would have dropped dead. The bull ran forward, screaming in agony as blood rained down. It slung its horns in the air, ran and came to a stop on the earth. Within a minute, Kaa walked up to the bull. Dark blood poured from the neck of the bull. Kaa skinned the bull with a knife Zucchina had stolen from him from the residents' kitchens. He folded the green skin and tied it with a bark rope. It was heavy, enough to tax even his strength. He staggered with the bundle until he could get under it and balance it on his head. He left the naked carcass for other wolves. Even under the burden, he moved fast like his tribe across the dry land in the night. He climbed the lower slopes of the mountain and left the bundled skin in a narrowed crevice in the rock. He covered it with large boulders for animals could come sniffing for the food from the rubbish radiated from the sewage of the colony. When he placed the last boulder, he looked up at the sky and saw that the curling scorpion was falling fast towards the dark horizon. Only then he realized how fast the night had went and went bounding back down the slope. He reached the edge of the company gardens just as the first rooster crowed in the darkness. Late that morning, as he waited on the bench with the other slaves outside the kitchens for his breakfast bowl of gruel and thick sour milk, Zucchina passed her way to tend the affairs of the household. "I heard you return last night. You were too late," she whispered without turning her head on the orchard stem of her neck. "If you are discovered, you will bring great hardship on all of us and our plans."
My task is almost finished, he rumbled. Tonight will be the last time I need to go out.
"Have a care, Kaa. There is much at risk," she said and glided away. Despite her warning, she had given him any help he'd asked for, and without watching her go, Kaa whispered to himself,
That one has the heart of a lioness.
That night, when the house had settled down for the night, he slipped through the grating. Again, the dogs were stilled by his whistle, and he had lumps of dried sausage for them. When he reached the wall below the lawns, he looked to the stars and saw in the eastern sky the first soft luminescence of the moonrise. He vaulted over it, and keeping clear of the road, guided himself by the touch of the wall towards the settlement. No more than 3 lights were aglow in the town, and 4 ships at the bay were all burning lanterns at their mastheads. The castle was a dark, brooding shape in the starlight. He waited by the edge of the street and tuned his ears to the sounds of the night. Once he was about to set across the open ground, he heard drunken laughter and snatches of singing as a party of soldiers from the castle came from the nasty debauchery in the taverns. One of them carried a tar-dipped torch, the flames wove uncertainly as the man stopped before the gibbet in the middle of the street and shouted an insult at the corpse of Will. His companions bellowed with drunk laughs at his humor and then reeled on, supporting each other towards the castle. When they disappeared through the gates and when the silence and darkness fell, Kaa moved again. Though he could not see more than a few paces ahead, he could smell Will's rotting body. William Stanley's body had been beheaded and neatly quartered. Slow John had used a butcher's cleaver to hack through the larger bones. Kaa brought down the head from the spike on which it had been impaled. He wrapped it in a clean white cloth and placed it in a saddlebag. He grabbed the other parts. The dogs from the village had carried off some smaller bones, but even working in the dark, Kaa was able to recover what remained. He closed and buckled the leather bag, slung it over his shoulder, and set off at a run to the mountains. Zucchina knew the mountains, every crack, crevice, and rock. She'd explained to him how to find the narrow entrance to the cavern where the previous night he left the raw bullskin. In the light of the rising moon, he returned to it. When he reached the entrance, he swiftly removed the boulders that covered the skin. Then he crawled further into the cavern and drew aside the bushes that hung down from the cliff above to conceal the dark throat of the cavern. He worked with a flint and steel to light one of the candles Zucchina had provided. Shielding the flame with cupped hands, he went and crawled into the low, natural tunnel on his hands and knees. The tunnel opened and he stood again. He held the candle above him and saw that the cavern would make a fitting burial place for Will. He left the saddlebag upon it and crawled back to get the skin. As he got the skin, he checked the moon to see where it lay.
I shall turn his face to greet 10,000 moons and all the sunrises forever,
he said, and softly dragged the heavy skin into the cave. He spread it about the rock. He placed the candle on the rock shelf. He unpacked the bag, and first he set aside those small offerings and ceremonial items he had brought. Then he lifted out Will's head and laid it in the center. It showed the thick yellow color of decay. He assembled the other body parts, putting them together with a bark rope, and put them together until Will was laying on his side, curled up with his knees. Then he folded the buffalo skin around him, covering only his body. He stitched the folds tight, for they would dry into an iron sarcophagus. Then he took the turtle shell comb, another gift from Zucchina, and combed his thin hair and braided it. He then sat him up facing the moon.
May this ship carry you over dark waters to the land where a woman awaits you, friend.
Kaa said, placing a tiny wood-carved vessel from which Jeb was captain of. Next, he placed a knife and then a bow next to him.
I have no sword for you, but you may have these weapons to defend yourself.
Then he offered a food bowl and water bottle.
May you never hunger or thirst again.
Lastly, he placed a cross of wood that Kaa had fashioned with a green albinine shell, white carved bone, and small stones from the river.
May the cross of your God, which guided you in life, guide you still in death,
he said. He then placed the candle of light.
May this fire keep you warm and be your light.
Kaa then sang a song he had learned in the language of the forest from his tribe in respect. He then peered up at the sky and saw it was time to go.
Farewell, my friend.
He smiled through tears and climbed out of the cliff and hurried back to the slave quarters before sunrise. Velda was a cautious man. At first he had not allowed Kaa to drive him in the carriage. This is a whim of yours, and I will not deny you, my dear, he told Katina. But a fellow savage, what does he know of horses? He is very good, and better by far than old Fredricus. Katina laughed. And he looks so splendid in the new livery I have designed for him. His fancy maroon coat and breeches will be of little interest to me when he breaks my neck, Van said, but despite his misgivings, he watched the way Kaa handled the team of greys. As Daniel and Finn helped me place a stone atop of the castle wall, I peered down into that grassy courtyard again as the sun baked down in the fall cool wind. Sweat drenched my back and chest, and me and Dan were shirtless, and the wind felt sweet on our bulging chests and bellies. My long brown hair had reached down to the front of my shoulders now, and was thick and shaggy at the back. The castle wall was coming up together well, and we were almost finished. As I looked down in the grass courtyard, Daniel elbowed me. You think he'll set us free once we finish this damn wall? I doubt it, lad. He'll probably find something else for us to do, I frowned. Or he'll become a good man and set us free and see we'll tell you the truth. Tim smiled, walking over, shirtless, carrying a hamper for the anvil, his blonde hair down to his neck, aiming his sharp smile at me. He has no heart, and your smile is often odd. What bothers thee? I asked, smiling at a smile. Oh, he's a fat pig and he sits at his desk all day. I'm sure of it. Finn laughed. Oh, just something I must speak about with you all in private. Wait till tonight in the cells, Tim grinned. Me, Finn, Jeb, and Daniel exchanged looks of interest of the young man's news. I looked back to the courtyard. Kaa drove the carriage into the yard to the Vandervelida suite in the castle. When the carriage bobbed on the grass, there was a collection of murmurs from the workers around us on the walls as the carriage crossed the street and through the gates. Kaa was sitting high on the coachman's seat with a long whip in his white-gloved hands. Jeb snickered. They made Kaa too gentleman. He does look mighty fine, I'd say, though, Finn added. Jeb wanted to shout at him, but I stopped him in fear of Hugo's nasty whip upon us stinging backs. The Dutch expected us to not be friends with the Negro. Nobody greet Kaa, I whispered to Daniel, sweating beside me. Ignore him. Pass it on. It's for his own safety. It's for his and our own safety. Daniel grinned and passed it on to the others of our little brigade. The order reached quickly down the ranks of the men of the scaffold and then those laboring in the yard. When the carriage came in through the gate to a turnout of the honor guard, continued on with the heat. I watched secretly at the carriage as I hammered in the tackle of nail, and me and Kaa met eyes for an instant. He drew the horses to a halt. He sprang down the ladder to the lower folding steps and opened the door for the governor. Once Van der Vliet had waddled up the stairs and vanished into a suite, Carl returned to a seat and sat, not moving, facing straight ahead. In a short time, the guards forgot about him and returned to their duties. An hour passed, and one of the horses threw its head nervously. From the corner of my eye, I watched Carl calm the horse with a tap of his hand. He stroked its head softly. The grey calmed down. He climbed down, went to a knee, and examined the hoof of the beast. Still on one knee, he looked up at me again for a second. Covered by the horse, and the guards were not paying attention, I saw Carl open his right fist to reveal white paper he had in his palm, then closed it and stood up. He walked down the team of horses, examining each animal and making note adjustments to the harness. At last, he turned and he leaned against the stone wall beside him, stooping to wipe the fine flowering of dust from his boots. I watched him take a quill of paper and secretly stuff it into a joint in the stonework of the wall. Van der Vliet showed no consideration for his servants or animals. Carl sat there till noon, until Van stumbled out down the stairs, back to the carriage, and they took off. In the dusk, as we climbed down the scaffold for the day and pretending to trip, I stumbled against the stone wall and grabbed the note Carl had left us. Once in the dungeon at the night, there was just enough light from the torch in its bracket at the top of the staircase as we all huddled in one cell this time, all five of us, to read Carl's message. For a slave, his handwriting was neat and legible, which surprised us all. I unrolled the note, and a tiny rub of charcoal fell into my palm for us to reply back, since we had no other contact with him. It reads, "William Stanley, bury with honor," I read aloud to him. A smile crossed Jeb's face. "That lovely bastard." "So that's where the body went after the 5th day. It was Carr," Daniel grinned. "Aye," I said happily. "He gave Will a proper burial that he deserved." "Give me the paper and rub," Jeb said, reaching his hand out. I handed it to him, and Jeb scribbled on it as best he could. Once he was done, he handed it back to me. I skimmed it, and it read, "Thank you, Carr." I put the note away, and we all faced Tim, who was leaning against the hay bunk bed. He looked at us full oddly. "What is it?" "You said you had some news to bestow to us this night," Finn said. "Oh, yes," Tim shouted happily. We all leaned in, intrigued by this young man's news. Tim had the happiest smile on his face, so I could tell it was good news. "A few days ago, when we were walking on the wall, I could see over to the bay. Ships docked and the such. Guess whose ship I spotted?" Tim asked, pausing. "Whose ship?" Dan asked. "Take a guess." Tim grinned. Finn rolled his eyes. "What? No, just tell us." Tim kept us in suspense on purpose.
Sorry about that, guys.
And I knew him only being 22, he was still a young man who liked to play jollies and games. "Well, don't keep us in suspense. Whose ship?" I asked. It's fucking Marquis' ship. They must have returned back here to maybe meet up with us. Perhaps after collecting all that gold near the African coast. Tim smiled happily. We all exchanged looks of awe and shock, and a thought popped into my brain. I aimed my finger at Tim. When did you see them again? I asked. A few days ago, Tim said. That's perfect. If he did go get that gold, he would be littered with glittering gems. He could pay off that Dutch swine for us to be his slaves and we are set free. Daniel smiled. Right, but how are we going to contact him? Finn asked. Fuck, I said, annoyed. I heard the cell rattle two doors down from us. I can help with that. I thought I said, his voice echoing through the dungeon. I poked my head out through the iron bars. How so? I have contact with Carr. He is a slave in the slave quarters and has some access to things like paper, I thought I said. What are you proposing? Jeb wanted. I propose, my friends, that I can ask him to fetch paper and quill for us. You write the note to your friend out in the bay, and I can have Carr deliver it to him. He has been escaping in the night. I see him through the cell window sometimes. The brat's been escaping? Clever devil. Jeb smiled. Good, okay, that's the plan. That is the French captain who spoke of that picture up in the sea? Aye, the same one. He's a good man, trust me, I said. Now, let's get Carr to get us some paper and we can write a note and have Carr take it, Daniel smiled. We're saved, boys, Tim laughed. Finally, some hope hit my heart for the first time in 3 months. I had been worried we would never get out of here and that Slow John would pick us off one by one. Now, Marquis, our French friend, is still present in Denmark, and this would work accordingly to our plan. How do we know if he's still here, though? You said, Timothy, it's been a few days when you saw him, Finn said. We'll just have to have faith, Tim said. Write on the paper another word, Jeb said. I write the note of thank you and saw there was some more room for another few words. I scribbled with the rubber black. French captain in bay is a friend. Take this to him at night. The following morning, when we were led in the courtyard to start our grueling work on the wall in the October wind, Daniel screened me as I carefully put the note back in its place on the stonework, where Carr had put it the previous day. In the middle of the afternoon, Carr drove the carriage at the bottom of the stairs and the fat governor stumbled out. Carr sat still for a while on the coachman's seat until he casually stepped down and fed the horses from grass on the ground. Then he pretended to stretch his legs and swiftly retrieved the note from the wall. I smiled seeing him take it and looked up into the blue sky to see the red starlings flutter down onto the east basin and perch there cooing to each other. Carr then looked at me and sat back up on his carriage coach sheet. We did not make the mistake of exchanging messages every day. Sometimes we waited a week or so before getting one. The next message, Carr delivered the second one, and Tim had fetched this one while Finn screened him, acting like they were scraping off some moss that hung to the stonework. That night in the dungeon, we all huddled in the candlelight to read it. It read,
Got the message. Willow's in heaven now. Honored. I see the French ship still in the bay flying his flag. We'll take the message to him tomorrow night.
My heart fluttered in joy for all of us that we might just make it out of this. We chatted happily to each other of our escape in quiet, and then we passed out in the winter wind of the dungeon. Governor van der Vliet was a passing drunk. He had swilled the Rhenish with the soup and the Maradilla with the fish and lobster. The red wines of Burgundy had accompanied the mutton stew and the pigeon pie. He had quaffed down the claret with the beef and intersected each draught of Dutch gin. When at last he rose from the board, he steadied himself as he wove to a seat by the fire with the hand of his mistress' arm. She was not usually so attentive, but all this evening she'd been in an affectionate and merry mood, laughing at his sallies, which on the other occasions she ignored, and refilling his glass with her own gracious hand before it was half emptied. Come to think of it, he could not recall when last they had dined alone, just the two of them, like a pair of lovers. For once, he had not been forced to put with the company of the rustic yokels from the settlement, or the servants, or without the boasting of Cornelius Schroeder. He fell back deep into his leather chair by the fire, and Zucchina brought him a big box of Dutch cigars. As she held him the burning taper for him, he peered with a lavish eye down the front of a costume. The soft swell of the breasts between which nestled in the exotic brooch moved him so that he felt his groin swell and engorge.
Katina was kneeling at the open fire, but she regarded him so slyly that he worried for a moment that she had seen him ogle the slave girl. But then she smiled and took up the poker that was heating in the fire and plunged its glowing tip of the stone jug of scented wine. It boiled and fumed, and she filled the bowl and brought it to him. "My beautiful wife," he slurred. "My little darling." He toasted her with the steaming bowl. He was not yet so intoxicated or gullible that he did not realize there would be some price to pay for this unusual kindness. There always was. Kneeling in front of him, Katina looked up at Zucchina, who hovered at his hand. "That is all for tonight. You may go." "I wish you sweet dreams of paradise, my lady." Zucchina smiled and left the room. She slid the carved screen door behind her, and she knelt there behind the door, listening to the two lovers. This was Katina's orders. Katina wanted Zucchina to listen and witness what transpired between them. She knew it would tighten the knot that bound the slave girl to her. Now, Katina moved behind her husband's chair. "You have had such a difficult week," she said softly. "What with the affair of the pirate body being stolen from the scaffold and now the new census and taxation ordinances from the colony? My poor darling, let me massage your shoulders." She removed his wig and kissed the top of his head. The stubble pricked her lips, and she stood back and dug her thumbs into his shoulders. Van sighed with pleasure. "Ah, how much do you love me?" she asked and nibbled at his ear. "I adore you," he blurted. "I love you." "You are always so kind to me." Her voice took on that husky quaint that made his skin tingle. "I would be kind to you. I've written to my father. I've explained of the pirate's demise and how it was not your fault it had happened. I shall give the letter to the captain of the homeward bound galleon, which is anchored in the bay at the moment, to hand it to Papa in person." "May I see the letter before you dispatch it?" he asked. "It would carry much weight if it could accompany my own report to the 17, which I should send on the same ship." "Of course you may. I shall bring it to you before you leave the castle in the morning." She brushed the top of his head with her lips and slid her fingers from the shoulders to his chest. She unhooked the buttons of his doublet and slipped both hands into the opening. She took a handful of his pendulous dugs and kneaded them like soft bread dough. "You are such a good wife," he said. "I would like to give you a sign of my love. What do you lack? A jewel? A pet? A new slave? Tell your old Van." "I do have a little whimsy," she admitted. "There's a man in the dungeons." One of the pirates, he hazarded. "No, a slave. A Thulda." "Ah, yes, I know about him. The rebel and runaway. I shall deal with him this coming week. His death warrant is already on my desk, waiting for my signature." "Shall I give him to Slow John? Would you like to watch? Is that it? You want to enjoy the sport? How can I deny you?" He grinned. She reached down and unfastened his breeches. He spread his legs and lay back in the chair to make the task easier for her. "I want you to grant Othola a reprieve," she whispered in his ear. He sat bolt up. "You are mad," he gasped. "You are so cruel to call me mad," she pouted. But he is a runaway. Him and his gang murdered 20 soldiers when they fetched him," Van said. "I know you cannot free him, but I want you to keep him alive. You can set them to work on the walls with the pirates," she smiled. "I can't do it," he said. "Not even for you." She came around from behind and knelt in front of him. She worked on the lacing of his breeches, and he tried to sit up, but she pushed him into the chair. "All the saints notice he is as soft and weak as dough," she thought as she grasped him. "Not even for your wife?" She smiled and felt it twitch. "I mean, it rather would be difficult," he stammered. "I understand," he muttered. "It was just difficult for me to compose my letter to my father. I would hate to be forced to burn it." She stood up and lifted her skirts as though she were about to climb. She was naked from the waist down and his eyes bulged. He struggled to sit up and at the same time tried to reach for her. "I would not have you on top of me again, you tub of pork," she thought as she smiled at him. She held him down on his shoulders. She straddled him with her legs. "Sweet Mary Jesus, what a mighty man you are," she cried as she took him in. The only pleasure she got was knowing Zucchina was listening from behind the door. She closed her eyes and imagined Zucchina's thick thighs and the treasure in between them. "Katina," he gurgled, "I love you." "The reprieve?" she asked. "I can't do it." "Then neither can I," she said, and lifted herself off him. She had to fight to keep herself from laughing as she watched his face swell. He wriggled and heaved under her, thrusting at the air. "Please!" he whimpered. "The reprieve?" she asked, keeping herself suspended above him. "Yes," he whined. "Anything! I will give you anything!" "I love you, my love," she whispered in his ears and sank down like a bird settling on his nest. Last time he lasted to the count of 100. This time she shall get him to 50. The following morning, Mansia opened the door to ours and Athorda's cell and roared, "Out, you murderous dog! Governor's orders, you go to work on the wall." Athorda stepped through the iron door and Mansia glared at him. "Seems you will not be dancing a quarter on the scaffold with Slow John, more the pity. But don't crow too loud. You'll give us as much sport on the castle walls. Bernard and his hounds will see to that. You will not last the winter out. I'll wager 100 guilders." He led us all through the dungeon up from the lower cells and paused on the step below the Thulda. For a long moment, we stared at each other, and then we descended into the yard. This is the first time I had seen a Thulda. "If you give me a chance, I'll cut the jib from your sister and flower her," Dan laughed. "Nice one, Han." I rolled my eyes. "I don't think so," Athorda laughed. Athorda was much smaller than me, and his black hair was matted and tangled. His body was neat, strong, and supple. His eyes were almond-shaped, and his back straight and dark black. There was a pride in his smiling jaw. "What cradle did you fall from?" Athorda laughed at me. I could tell he was happy to be out of the dark, damp dungeon. "I asked for a man, and they sent for a boy." "Quiet, you!" I snickered. "Come on, you muttering renegades!" Bernard bellowed as we came to the wall as the dogs gnarled. "You may have escaped the noose, but I will still have some things in store for you. You slit some of my throats and my comrades when you escaped." I could tell most of the people here hated Athorda. Bernard turned to me. "You stinking pirate! Get up on that damn scaffold now! The rest of you to the wall or I'll feed you to my dogs!" Bernard separated us today. He sent me and Daniel up on the scaffold and the rest of my gang to the castle wall. Down in the courtyard, unloading the masonry blocks from the oxen-drawn wagons as they came down from the quarry. That night, we were shoved back in our cells and we all huddled around to hear Thulda's daring escape story in detail. We made a place on the straw floor in our cell to sleep near Thulda's cell so we could all talk quietly. "I heard you got the message from Ka. What'd it be?" I asked sadly. "How many men of his crew in the harbor?" "I was able to speak with them this morning at the slave quarters. He spoke that your Frenchman is still here and is wanting to help you escape. He said Marquis will try to construct a plan of rescue." Athorda smiled. "Perfect," Tim smiled. "Shouldn't we send him another letter explaining the layout of the castle so he doesn't get confused?" Finn asked. "Good idea, young Finn," Dunn said. "One more message to Shinda home." "I'll get Khan to deliver it tomorrow night," Athorda said.
Chapter 12. There we go. Chapter 12 is really short. It's only 2 pages. November 1680, JabberWocky grounds, Dutch colony of Denmark.
We took the message a week later to Marquis, and a week later the reply came back. Marquis was aware of the settlement and how it was set up for his storming in to rescue us. As we played with notes back and forth over a number of days, times got more grim. The following week, it fell into the cold month of November. From that time, we lost 6 more men on the scaffold. Two fell from the scaffold. One was struck with a masonry block on the head, and the other one hit the cobbles. The sixth was a man named Oliver Lovell, who was a sailor from Finland as well, and Jeb related to the young man well. Early in the imprisonment, his foot had been badly crushed beneath an iron wheel on one of the ox wagons from the quarry. Even though Dr. Czar looked at the bone and placed a split between it, the foot wound would not mend. It swelled up and burst out into spirating ulcers that smelled like dead skin. Hugo Bernard drove him back to work, even though he limped around the yard on a crutch. Me and Dan tried to protect him, but if we intervened too much, Hugo would become harsh. We tried to shield him from Hugo's whips, but it was no use. Oliver was a tailor by trade and had a timid nature, but one day he had had enough and tried to swing a mallet at Hugo. Hugo was not swift enough, and a hit struck him in the shin. It was a glancing blow that didn't break bone, but it smeared his skin with blood that seeped to his shoes. Sir, he cried and fell to his knees. I did not mean it. I'm just so tired. Forgive me. Hugo staggered back, then looked to examine his wound. He ignored Oliver's pleas and peeled back his hose to see the long graze on the shin. He limped to the hitching rail with his hounds attached to the leashes. He pointed to Oliver. Get him! They hurled themselves against the leashes, baying and gaping with wide red mouths and long white fangs. Get him! Bernard urged. Please! Oliver yelled, struggling to rise, toppling back, then crawling towards where his crutch was propped against the wall. Bernard slipped the hounds. They bounded across the yard and leapt on Oliver, sending him over. They smashed their teeth on him. One went for his face, while the other clung to his arm, and one went for his belly. His screams grew fainter and fainter until he was a fleshy dead heap of dog bones. Throw him in a dung heap in the castle. He'll be more used to the goals. Bernard had laughed. That was the last straw at this point. We prayed each day for Marquis' rescue.
Let's chat. There we go, guys. That's it. That's all for the stream for today. So, yeah, thank you guys for joining. I know that was a bit of a short one, but I will probably do the next stream tomorrow sometime or Friday. Depends on when I feel like it and when I can. I'll just have to look at my schedule. But so yeah, next will be, from now on, it will just be a chapter stream because they get so long to the point where they're like pretty much like 40 minutes to an hour long. So yeah. So from now on, it will just be a chapter stream. So next stream, it was so good. Thank you. So basically, yeah, it's sad. William Stanley. I was honestly, when I was writing that part with William Stanley, that was probably one of the saddest things to create in the story. It was pretty rough. But I really, really enjoyed it. It was fun. I love doing these streams. It's just a good time all around. So I'll probably do chapter 13 tomorrow, which is a big scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the audiobooks. I'm very, very excited. So I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will always ask a question at the end of the stream. What was your favorite part in these two chapters out of chapter 11? It was but a very good chapter. Thank you. What was your favorite part out of chapter 11 or 12? Personally, I think my favorite part in it is chapter 11 when William's death. Yeah, William's death, and then like when Kai gives him a little burial. I think that's my favorite part. So yeah, who is your favorite character right now? That's what I'll ask one more question. Favorite character right now. Ooh, I'm tired. Watch this. Marquis and Henry. Yep. Yepers, they cool. All right, guys. Yeah, Marquis and Henry, and probably Daniel. Pretty cool guys. Well, thank you guys for joining the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time. Please leave a like on this video and remember to subscribe to become a jack-o'-lantern. And thank you so much for joining the stream. I will see you guys in the next one, in the next stream for chapter 13. Thank you for joining and have a nice day, guys. See ya.